Hello everyone, in this video we're going through a comprehensive example of our capitalization of interest problem. So this in conjunction with the first two videos for the basics basically of capitalization of interest, which just had basically a bunch of definitions. And then we had another video for the specific in general interest rates example. Okay, if we watch all three of those kind of in conjunction with each other, then we'll get a full picture of this topic. This topic's a little difficult to cover all at the same time, so it's kind of best to just get it in bits and pieces here and there. And then once we've seen all three videos, the topic as a whole should make a good amount of sense. Okay, so basically, and I'm going to be referring back to the first handout, which is called Self-Constructed Assets and Capitalization of Interest. Okay, that's basically the basics one that just has like the definitions. Okay, so we will use the following steps to solve capitalization of interest problems. The first step, we solve for the weighted average cumulative expenditure. Again, we don't have a great grasp on that yet, but we will at the end of this problem, by the end of this problem. Second, we determine avoidable interest, which we're starting to get a grasp on that one, okay? Third, we determine the actual amount of interest incurred. That's actual interest. We know what that is by this point. We understand actual interest. And then fourth, we compare the avoidable and the actual interest. The lower is capitalized. The total interest minus the capitalized amount is expensed in the income statement. These last two steps are not too bad for us. We just want to get a better understanding of, first of all, these two things. What does weighted average cumulative expenditure really mean? And then what is avoidable interest? Okay, we want to get an idea of what do those two things really mean? Okay, and we will be able to get a better feel over those after this problem. And then also the other thing we want to get from this problem is we want to just understand, okay, if we were giving something like this on the exam, which we most certainly might, right, how do we solve this? Because this is definitely one of the more challenging problems. It's a 2-year problem, okay, and something like this is totally fair game, right? And so we need to be able to do every single thing that is shown after this first page, all this stuff on this second two pages, okay? Second and third pages, we need to be able to do that on our own, right? If something like this was given to us on an exam, we need to be able to construct everything on the next two pages, okay? So let's just start going through the example, and we'll kind of, we'll just talk about these as we go, okay? So Clay Thompson Enterprise began construction of a new plant on January 1 of 2016. On this date, the company purchased a parcel of land for $250, paid surveying costs of $5,000 and back taxes of $10. On January 1st, 2016, Thompson obtained a $2 million 1-year 10% loan specifically for this project. Okay, so this will be specific debt, right? We've talked about this in other videos, mainly the specific debt. This would be specific debt. We talked about this extensively in the specific and general debt interest rate example, so make sure you've watched that video before this one. Basically, you want to watch the basics video, then you want to watch the specific and general interest rates example, and then we want to go through this one, just because the ordering is important for this specific topic, to have watched them in that order, okay? So, the specific debt. Okay, this is specific debt, meaning it's debt that we took out specifically to finance this project, okay? Then Thompson made the following payments throughout 2016 and 2017, construct the building, gives us all these payments. Then it tells us the building was completed on December 31 of 2017. Okay, so basically we can see we have like a 2-year time horizon here. We start on January 1, 2016, we end on December 31 of 2017. Then it wants us to compute weighted average cumulative expenditure, calculate the amount of interest capitalized, and determine the amount of interest expensed for 2016 and 2017. Okay, so let's flip the page, and let's go ahead and look at what these problems actually look like when we're solving them. Okay, so let's just get those lined up. Okay, so basically this is weighted average cumulative expenditure. This is how we calculate it. Okay, so let's flip back to the first page, and let's just to the first packet. The second page on the first packet says weighted average cumulative expenditure. This is in the middle of the page basically, is the expenditures made to construct an asset multiplied by the number of months out of 12 the expenditure can incur interest. Okay, the expenditures multiplied by the number of months out of 12 that the expenditure can incur interest. So if we look here, okay, we see we have all these payments, right? And then we see the capitalization period. This is the number of months out of 12 that the expenditure can incur interest, right? Because what happens is that when we talk about avoidable interest, okay, weighted average cumulative expenditure and avoidable interest are very much intertwined, okay? So weighted average cumulative expenditure, what we're doing is that, okay, we're saying, let's say, for example, this is basically avoidable interest here. Okay, avoidable interest says, okay, let's say that as of January 1st, okay, we took out $265,000. Let's say we took out exactly that much money. Okay, we know we didn't do that. We know we took out a loan of $2 million. That's what it tells us in the facts themselves, right? But let's say that we were able to go to the bank and borrow exactly $265,000 on January 1st. Okay, well, how much interest could we avoid if we didn't take out that $265,000? That's what we're solving for here. Okay, and then the same thing, what if we took out a loan of $300,000 exactly on March 1st? Because that's what's happening, right? We're saying, okay, 265 times 12 over 12. Okay, then what we do at the end is we multiply by the actual interest rate of 10% to get avoidable interest. Okay, that's what we end up doing at the end. So what we're doing here is we're weighting these amounts by the number of months out of 12 that they can incur interest for. And then that's going to give us our weighted average cumulative expenditure. Okay, so this weighted average cumulative expenditure is already weighted, right? It's already weighted for the number of periods that the expenditure could incur interest in theory, right? This is a theoretical thing. This is not exactly what's happening in the real world, but we're using this. And then again, if we remember from the previous video, once we get our weighted average cumulative expenditure, we take that amount, okay, we can see it right here, jumping forward a little bit, we use that to calculate avoidable interest. We just multiply by the interest rate for the loan specifically, okay? In this case, it works out. There are other cases where it's not that easy, okay? But in this case, that's the way it works, okay? So that's basically weighted average cumulative expenditure. The weighted average cumulative expenditure is the amount that you incur times the amount of months out of 12 it can incur interest. That gives you weighted average cumulative expenditure. Then, once we get that weighted average cumulative expenditure, we multiply that by the interest rate for the loan, okay? Specifically for the loan, assuming that we don't actually, assuming that this weighted average cumulative expenditure doesn't go above this $2 million, we're always just using the 10%. Okay, we know that that's not always the case because we've seen in the other video, in the specific and general interest rate problem, okay, we've seen how that works, but just to simplify it a little bit here, okay, we just multiply this weighted average cumulative expenditure by the 10%, which is given to us in the problem. That gives us avoidable interest. Okay, so hopefully after that explanation that makes sense. What's weighted average cumulative expenditure? What's avoidable interest? Okay, avoidable interest is sort of this theoretical amount if we're taking out $300,000, $500,000 each specific time and then weighting it by the capitalization period, meaning how much time out of 12 months a year it could actually incur interest, right? Okay, so then so let's just go through these amounts. 265, where's that coming from? Okay, well that's the 250 plus the 5 plus the 10. Okay, because basically what happens is that in this problem, we buy a piece of land and we pay these surveying costs and back taxes. Those are capitalized into the cost of land. That is something that is covered in other videos potentially about what is capitalized into land, what is capitalized into the cost of a building. But basically these amounts are capitalized into the cost of a building. And if we remember from our first video, the very bottom here, for expenditures for land, if a company purchases a piece of land with the intention of constructing a building on it, the interest costs associated with the payments for the land are capitalized into the building. Okay, meaning that if we make payments for land where we're going to construct a building on it, we're going to capitalize the interest costs into the building. Okay, and that's what we're calculating here. When we're doing our weighted average cumulative expenditure, when we're doing our avoidable interest, we're trying to calculate how much are we going to capitalize into the building account. Okay, because that's what we're doing here. We're constructing a building. Okay, a plant. Okay. So that's basically why we have 265 there. Okay, and then we multiply by 12 out of 12 because obviously from January 1st to December 31, it's 12 months out of 12 months, right? And then we have March 1st. Then we're going to look down here. This is where our payments come in, the amount of payments to construct the building. Okay, basically on March 1st, they pay $300,000. May 1st, they pay $500,000. December 31st, they pay $700,000. Then we literally just weight that by the number of months left in the year. Okay, now, in this problem, we're starting at March 1st. We're ending at December 31st. That's 10 out of 12. May 1st to December 31st is 10 out of 12. Okay. The other thing you have to be careful of is, this is one thing I'm going to mention here. It's not specifically mentioned in this problem, but it could be, okay? Let's say that the building is completed on September 30th of 2016, okay? Instead of December 31st of 2017, okay? When you're determining how long these payments are outstanding, it's to the earlier of two dates, okay? It's either going to be the end of the year if in this case, like in this problem, right, the building is continuing to be constructed in the next year, so that would mean that the interest can still accrue all the way to the end of the year, right? Because the loans are still outstanding and we're still incurring interest costs and all of those things, right? But let's say that this building actually is done on September 30th, okay? That means that what we would do in that case is technically in this case, the interest can only accrue until September 30th. Okay, so we have to go from January 1st to September 30th. Okay, that should be 9 months out of the year, right? Because then we have October, November, December, 3 months. Okay, and then we have to do the same thing for March, or do the same thing for May. Okay, so we have to be careful in the problem when we're reading it. If it's telling us that the building is completed during like the middle of the year or something like that, then at that point, if we flip back to our first page here, okay, if we look at the bottom here, okay, 3 criteria must be met for a company before it can capitalize interest, the capitalization period, when companies are allowed to capitalize interest. So as I said in the first video, we're only allowed to keep capitalizing interest as long as all 3 of these are continuously being met. Okay, if the asset was actually completed in the middle of the year or at September 30th or something, then activities to ready the asset for intended use, those are no longer taking place, right? Because we're done. We're done with all the activities, right? We might still be we might have made some expenditures so far and we might be incurring interest, but we're definitely not meeting number 2 because we're done. We've made the asset, right? And so in that case, we can no longer keep capitalizing interest, okay? We have to stop capitalizing interest once the building is done, okay? And so in that case, just be careful with the dates. It's not in this problem, right? If the building is completed at December 31 and we start January 1, well, we do the whole year, right? Or if it's a situation where you start January 1, and the building is just continues into the next year, then you do the full year as well, right? Because again, you do the earlier of the end of the year or the completion of the building. And in that case, the earlier of is the end of the year, okay? The other thing to note is, obviously if you don't have a January 1 payment, right? If you start on March 1st and you go to the end of the year, it would be 10 out of 12. If you start on March 1st and then you go till September or whatever, then it's, some amount less than 10 out of 12. It must be, like 8 months out of the year or something like that, okay? So just be careful with the dates is what I'm trying to say, okay? That was a little bit of a detour, but that was just to make everything completely 100% clear for these problems, so that way there's no mistakes made in that way, okay, with dates, because dates are very important, especially in these problems, okay? So then once we do all this math up here, which again is literally just multiplying across, we can do that. We add it up, we get 848,333 as our weighted average cumulative expenditure. Now we calculate the interest that will be capitalized, okay? So the amount of interest capitalized, again, is the lower of the actual interest or the avoidable interest. Okay, actual interest is literally just 2 million times 0.1 because that's the only debt outstanding. We actually don't have general debt in this problem. We didn't note that before, but it's clear because it doesn't tell us we have general debt, right? So we only have specific debt in this problem. If we had general debt, we would know what to do because we've gone through another example like that, okay? So all we would do is literally take those same principles and apply it to this problem. But so actual interest is literally just principal times interest percentage gives us 200,000. Avoidable interest, again, is just the weighted average cumulative expenditure times the interest rate that we're using. The interest rate that we're using in this case is the specific debt interest rate because, again, the weighted average cumulative expenditure, which is 848,000 basically, is less than the actual specific debt. And so when it is less than or equal to the specific debt, we're always using that interest rate for the specific debt to determine avoidable interest. So again, we determine that the lower is obviously avoidable interest of actual and avoidable, so the amount capitalized is 84,000. The amount expense is always the difference between total and then avoidable, or sorry, not total and avoidable. Total and then the amount capitalized. So 200,000 minus the amount capitalized is the amount expensed. And that's for 2016, okay? So we've done the first part of the problem, okay? Now, before we move on to the next year, what we want to note is that our total expenditures for the year were $1,765,000, and then our avoidable interest was $84,833. Okay. So basically, this $84,833 was actually capitalized into the building account, and then these are all our expenditures for. Part of them are for the building. All these three are for the building, and then this is for land. But again, remember, when we have land, we're going to use that to calculate our interest costs for what we're capitalizing into the building, right? That's what we're doing, okay? So the reason I say that is because we flip to the next page and we see that the first two things here are, one, all the payments we made in the previous year to either get the land or the building. All the payments that we've made to help construct this building, meaning the land that we built the building on and the actual building itself, okay? And then the second thing is the avoidable interest that got capitalized, okay? So remember, we need to bring forward all expenditures capitalized in the previous year and interest capitalized in the previous year when calculating the weighted average cumulative expenditure for the second year, which is in this case 2017, okay? The reason we do that is because these expenditures were already made and they were capitalized, right? And so those can still incur interest, okay? So we have to bring them forward. Do not forget to do this. If you forget to do this, you will lose points, okay? So always, always remember, you bring forward the capitalized interest, which in this case was avoidable, and then we also bring forward all of the expenditures that we capitalized in the previous year, okay? And then the capitalization period would just be 12 out of 12 because we're going from January 1st to December 31 of 2017. Again, like we talked about in the previous problem, or the previous year, if the date was September 30th or something different, then we have to remember that if it's September 30th, we'd have 9 out of 12, right? But it's not, it's December 31st. Again, just remember to be careful of the dates. If the dates change, then we need to be careful of how long these expenditures are actually outstanding for, okay? Next, we have April 1st. It tells us it's 200,000. September 1st is 150. Okay, and again, we just weight that by the year, the amount of months out of the year that it could be outstanding. So April will be 9 months until December 31st. September 1st would be September, October, November, December, 4 months out of 12. That gives us, and then we multiply across. Okay, it gives us 2,049,000. Okay, 2,049,833. Okay, for our weighted average accumulated expenditure. Okay, now we need to calculate the interest that is capitalized. Again, it's going to be the amount of interest capitalized is the lower of the actual or the avoidable interest. Okay, actual interest again is 2 million times 0.1 because that didn't change from last year because we still have the same debt outstanding. Okay, then we have to do avoidable interest. Avoidable interest would be basically the 2 million. Basically, it would be this amount, right? Normally, but technically, it's capitalized. Technically, we cannot capitalize anything more than 200,000 because the lower amount is this actual interest rate here of 2 million times 0.1. We have to actually do the lower, okay? And so technically the amount capitalized is going to be 200,000. It's the actual interest. So the amount expensed will be the total minus the amount capitalized is equal to 0. Okay. Avoidable interest here. Okay. This calculation, okay, it could also, the other way you could do it is you could also think about, okay, technically, if we, technically we can only use the 10% rate up to, either way this works, it doesn't really make a difference, but basically the other way you could think about it is that, as we talked about in previous things, we only capitalize the weighted average cumulative expenditure at this specific debt rate up to the actual amount of the loan itself, okay, which in this case is 2 million. So technically you could also think that avoidable interest is just 2 million times 10% because we're only going to basically use avoidable interest for the specific debt up to the weighted average accumulated expenditures equal to 2 million in this case. Okay, so it's 200,000. Either way, we get the same result. It really doesn't make a difference. Okay, so yeah, so either way we calculate that, we get the same result. We just need to remember that we're gonna capitalize the lower one, and even if this was 200,000 here, it'd still be the same amount, right? It'd be 200 versus 200, so we would capitalize 200, which means we expense 0 because we're capitalizing all of it. Okay. Now, the reason I did it this way is just because technically the avoidable interest would be 205,000 basically because we have to use some interest rate, okay? So this is the correct way of doing it, but you could also, just to actually map it back to the way that we did it before, where we only use the 10% rate up to the actual value of the weighted average accumulated up to the actual of the weighted average accumulated expenditure, we only capitalize up to the specific debt principal amount at that 10% rate, okay, you can kind of do it this way as well. This is technically like what you would really see as the right answer, but it doesn't really make a difference in this case because we still get the same amount capitalized, and we still get, whether we do it this way or this way, we get the same amount capitalized and we get the same amount expensed. Okay, so the reason I did it this way is because technically we still have to use some interest rate, and really the only interest rate we have is 10%. Okay, so basically that is the end of this problem. And the other thing to note here is that this is like an example where avoidable interest is higher than actual interest. Okay, some people think that avoidable interest can never be higher than actual interest, but this is actually one specific case. This is kind of why I made this problem this way, because this is one case where avoidable interest actually exceeds actual interest. Okay, and then the other thing, just to clear this up, sorry if this wasn't the clearest, if we remember from before, our weighted average, we do our specific borrowing interest rate, we apply it to the weighted average accumulated expenditure that is less than or equal to the amount of debt specifically borrowed for the project. Okay, and the general borrowing is for the weighted average accumulated expenditure from that is more than the amount of debt specifically borrowed. Okay, so once weighted average accumulated expenditure goes above the debt specifically borrowed, we use the general borrowing interest rate. Technically in this problem, we don't have a general borrowing interest rate, right? So we could use that first step that says, okay, up to $2 million of principal, up to $2 million of principal, that weighted average accumulated expenditure up to $2 million would be at 10%, right? But then technically we still have $49,000, okay, that we would need to do at 10% as well, okay? And because of the fact that we don't have any other interest rate, we don't have a general rate in this case, we really should use the 10% to solve for avoidable because that's the only rate that we have, okay? So just to clear that up. But again, this is an example where avoidable is actually higher than actual, and you still can only capitalize the lower, okay? And the lower is actual, which means once you actually expense all of your actual interest, right, the amount expense is zero because you're just taking the total, which is $200,000, subtracting away the full amount, which is $200,000, right? That's the amount you actually capitalized. That's what you're subtracting. You get zero expensed, okay? So that's a full look at capitalization of interest within those 3 videos. Again, this is a very challenging topic, but watching these videos maybe a couple of times each back, it should make sense. Everything, once you've seen all 3 in conjunction, watching one at a time may not make the most sense just because you have to see the full array of problems and examples to be able to really grasp it. But once you've seen all 3, it should be start to make more sense. So that's the end of this topic, and I hope that was helpful.